Hey friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're taking a look at a little fixed blade knife. This is the Brisa Necker 70. So it's designed as a neck knife. Full fixed blade, full tang, Sandvik 12C27 stainless steel blade. You know, it's a little knife under 3 inches in the blade, and it's kind of cool. They come two ways. You can get them with Scandi grind or with this full flat grind. And they've got like 5 or 6 different handle options, micarta, and then 2 different wood handle options if that's what you want. They're permanently affixed. You can't take them apart. You just get them as you get them. Now, Brisa is a company based in Finland. Now, Finland, you know, as we know, has been making really cool knives, especially, you know, Puukko style knives, various Scandi grind knives for a long time. But currently Brisa is making this knife in Portugal. Now I've been speaking with, emailing with Brisa, and they plan to move all of the production that they have in Portugal to Finland by the end of 2024. So that's less than 2 years from now. They currently do make some of their knives in Finland, actually fairly close to the Arctic Circle, and they're very proud of that. They missed the Arctic Circle by about 80 miles. So they're way up north, like they're further north than I've ever lived. So that's kind of cool actually. And in any case, this little Necker knife, I want to talk about it. I want to tell you all about it. They've got 2 sheath options. I got the leather sheath option. I bought mine at White Mountain Knives, where you can save 10% with coupon code CCE. And just before we get started, a big shout out to my financial supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I appreciate your help very, very much. Now, as we go to the tabletop, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you've not yet subscribed. And if you don't like the video, hit the dislike button. Do something, interact with the video in some way. It really does help out. Let's get started. Let's begin by taking a look at the sheath. Here, let me first overlay a picture of the Kydex sheath. I think I'd prefer the Kydex sheath for a neck knife. This, you can wear it as a neck knife, but you can see how thick that is. Oh, I got some dirt from when I was sharpening on my finger. That's just some metal dust. Don't worry about that. It's a little thick this way, isn't it? And they don't include anything to actually carry it as a neck knife, like some paracord or something. I really wish they would do something like that. And if they really meant this as just a neck knife, you know, maybe something else around here would be preferred. But that said, the people in that part of the world, in Scandinavia, you know, north central Europe as well, they are so used to wearing neck knives. Neck knives are just a natural thing. It's kind of like the First Nations peoples in North America. They wore knives around their necks all day long. Not literally, but you know what I'm trying to say. They wore neck knives like crazy. And stuff quite a lot bigger than this too. I often get flack from people saying neck knives, oh, they're way too big, it's way too bulky, you don't want to have something like that around your neck. Well, in a lot of circumstances, no. Like an urban EDC, probably not. But not everybody's urban EDC. Now, if you really want to, you can get this into, you know, many belts. And I wouldn't say every belt, but you could wear it as a belt knife if you wanted to. But if you had the Kydex option, then you could put all kinds of, you know, connection options for where and how you want to carry it. But the leather seems like it's pretty decent leather, and you know, it's well put together. Got a full hole through rivet in here. I don't understand why they put a full hole rivet in there. You know, they put a, you know, a capped rivet up here. I just would have thought they would have done the same thing there. It's not like it's like an 8-inch blade and you need a rivet hole to tie it onto the side of your thigh, but it doesn't matter. It's not bad at all. Yeah, the leather's pretty good. It's nothing stupendous, but it's nothing stupid either. So there you go. The leather sheath is there. And I'll do all the weights and measurements a little bit later on. And here's the knife. What we've got is a slight drop point, you know, nice belly here. A little bit of a flat edge here. There's no sharpener's choil. Now, sharpener's choils are not all that common in finished knives, I guess. But I do prefer sharpener's choil. I can understand why they didn't put it on their Scandi grind version, But on this, I would prefer that there was a sharpener's choil. And if you take a look at a close-up of this area, you can see that they had to stop sharpening before they got to that plunge. It doesn't look particularly ugly right now, but as you sharpen this knife more and more times and the steel moves its way back up, you know, this area here is going to become a mess. It just is. But a sharpener's choil can remedy that to make it look nicer. Sharpening, you won't be sharpening into the plunge every time and whatever, what have you. But that's okay. Like I said, this is not a big knife. This is about 2.6 inches of cutting edge. Equally, it's about 2.6 inches, you know, along the spine as well until you get to the handle scale. And like I showed, full flat grind. The badging on there is not too terribly big, which I like. Now you will find some of these knives that say Enzo on them. Capital E, capital Z, or Z. This says Brisa, B-R-I-S-A. I think I said Brisa like it was a Z when I did the unboxing. Silly me. And some of the older versions have different style of badging on it, but that's the company name and the stainless 12C27. Not bad. Satin finish, pretty nice. We've got the handle. It's swelling up just a little bit and then coming to like a teardrop end with a hole through it and a brass pin and a solid brass pin there. And of course, it's a full tang all the way around. Now, it's been polished up pretty nice. Like if you look at the spine of this knife, it's nicely polished, looks beautiful. You can go all the way around, but if I turn the light just right, see all of a sudden it gets dark right there? That spot still has some of the more rough finishing on it. So these are not perfectly polished. They're not very expensive either, but they're not perfectly polished up. Like not everything's cleaned up perfectly. You see some scratch lines in the pin that holds it together. And this pin doesn't look perfect either, but it looks good. I don't prefer the fact that they like fully polished this micarta, like till it's got a glossy finish. It makes the micarta a little bit smooth. I would have liked the micarta to be a little bit rough so you can get a super solid grip on it. That said, the shape here is quite comfortable and you can get a fairly secure grip even though it is polished. I just would have preferred that it wasn't. Like I said, it comes in several colors or, you know, different kinds of wood, and it's fairly decent. When they sanded this, of course, micarta is going to sand more easily than steel, and so you can run your finger along, you know, across it, and you'll find it catching in a few places. That's just sort of par for the course for these mass-produced kind of knives. And although you can't feel it just in your hand, like with the skin of your thumb here, you can't feel it. You have to intentionally try to use a nail to try to catch that little bit of an edge on there. Not bad. What I did find just slightly uncomfortable, because my hands are just barely into the extra large range, I tend to choke up a little bit more so I can get my pinky to grip on here as well. And then I found this edge, I'll point to it with my screwdriver, this edge of steel right here is a little bit too crisp for my liking. I wish they would have broken that edge just a little bit, kind of like they did here. They just sort of softened it up just a little bit. And of course, at the spine here, they tried to keep it pretty crisp. I was able to throw sparks with that, and that's not a problem. But the crispness right here, a very, very minor thing, like extremely minor. And it's something I could fix at home super easily with just a little bit of either a file or even some sandpaper just to not make that so crisp there. So I just wanted to give you every single point that I come across with everything that I think of when I'm looking at it and experience. But other than that, it's quite nice. How well does this cut? Well, they got the edge quite thin, like I mean very thin, and in my testing it cut quite good. Initially I tested the sharpness, didn't get a very good score. I was cutting with it, it wasn't that great, and so I started rubbing my nail along it, and it felt like there was just the slightest burr. I stropped it 5 times, and then it started cutting beautifully. So, of course, they don't have time to do stropping in a knife factory. I wish they did, but I don't think they did have time to do any stropping because they didn't do it. And it would have been a nice touch for this. The sharpening was pretty good on it, but that thin edge and the grind angles you'll find are pretty good. It slices and cuts very, very well. Now, one big thing, this might be sort of a rabbit trail for some people, but I don't think it's a rabbit trail. Most people, when they're using a knife, they use either the first 1.5 to 2 inches from the heel of the blade going forward, or they use the first inch and a half or 2 inches from the tip back. So if you've got a 2-inch blade, you can do most things with a knife. Certainly not everything. Of course not everything. But most of the things that people do, they're either cutting around here or they're cutting around here. So they're either cutting with the tip a lot or they're cutting right near their fingers a lot. And that's just at least way over 80% of knife use happens within those 2 inches of either end. And this thing's 2.6 inches. So it's a very useful knife. This is a good birder knife. Like if you catch birds, shoot birds, to take care of doing the butchering of a bird, this size knife is great. But just as a simple EDC, this size does so many tasks, and it does them well. Being 12C27, it's soft enough to sharpen in the field quite easily, and yet it's a good stainless steel, a decent corrosion resistance, a decent kind of hardness. 50 years ago, this would have been a very excellent steel, and now it's just a budget steel, but it's still good. It's pretty close to the bottom of my list of what I accept for stainless steels or any steels, but it's still on the list of what I find acceptable. All right, there cannot be any teardown, so let's get right on to the measurements. The weight of this knife, 66 grams, that's 2.33 ounces. The weight of the sheath, 33 grams, 1.16 ounces. And together, we've got 99 grams, 3.49 ounces. That's not bad at all. Like I said, from the factory, the sharpness on here was 275 bests. I stropped it just a little bit, and it got down to 135, which is just a tiny bit sharper than the average knife that I review. So that really helped it an awful lot. There was just that tiny little burr that was, affecting the sharpness score. If you're wondering how I measure sharpness, I'll post a video up here in the corner. I'll maybe post it at the end as well on how I measure sharpness using a sharpness tester. The rest of the measurements, like I said, the cutting edge length and the length from the tip to the closest spot on the handle is the same, 66.3 millimeters, 2.61 inches. The thickness of the blade stock, right here where the blade meets the handle at the ricasso, the full thickness, 3.43 millimeters, 0.135, so a bit over 1/8 of an inch to start with, but it does start to taper quite early. Most of the tapering happens, in the last 3/4 of an inch. The blade depth this way, the widest point is 21.8 millimeters, 0.858 of an inch. How thick is it behind the grind? Measured in 3 places. The average score is 0.3 millimeters, 12 thousandths of an inch thin. I like that. For this knife, that's awesome. Grind angles. This side's got an average score of 18.7 degrees. This side's got an average score of 18.2 degrees. Started at 18.3, ended at 18.1. So that's 0.2 degrees of change along the length. That's quite good. This side started at 18.5, ended at 18.9, and that's 0.4 degrees of change. So it's sharpened better than most knives that I review. There is a little bit of waving going on with the sharpening, Now for the handle length measured this way, 85.9 millimeters, 3.52 inches. The thickness of the handle, you can see from the grain of the micarta here, this denim micarta, that it's thickest right there, and then it starts getting thinner at the back. The widest point is 13.6 millimeters, 0.535 of an inch. Handle depth, well, it keeps getting bigger till the end here, 23.5 millimeters, 0.925 of an inch. And the grip area between my 2 thumbs here, it's roughly 8.25 centimeters or 3.25 inches, because being rounded here, where exactly do you draw the line, right? So that's sort of a rough estimate, but over 3 inches, which means most hands are going to get at least a 3-finger grip. Unless your hands are well into the extra large, you might not, but I'm just barely into the extra large, and I've got my pinky giving some, purchase on the handle. The total length of this knife now, 156 millimeters, 6.14 inches. I got it from White Mountain Knives. These are $65. I think they're all with the leather sheath though. I think White Mountain Knives has got 5 different models, colors, and it's $65. Now $65, you take off 10% with coupon code CCE, and then what it is, $58.50. If you convert that to Canadian, it's about 77 Canadian dollars for this knife from White Mountain Knives. Of course, you're going to have to pay shipping into Canada. If you are in the United States, there's no shipping at all. If you want to buy this in Canada, though, then Bushcraftcanada.com has got the best price. They've got many of these. They even have some with the Kydex, and they're $89.99. So that's like $13 more Canadian than it is at White Mountain Knives. And of course, in Canada, you're going to have to pay your sales tax, and you're going to have to pay shipping as well. So knives do cost more in Canada, but if you don't want to buy this from White Mountain Knives, if you're a Canadian, then bushcraftcanada.com is your best choice. So that's the price and everything. What is my summary on this thing? I like it. I'm quite happy with it. Especially once I put my own sharpening on this, like once it gets dull, I'm going to sharpen this myself, and it's going to cut even better. If I keep this knife, I'm going to add a tiny little sharpener's choil in there, maybe not so tiny, but a small sharpener's choil, and I'll, make this a little bit smoother so it's not that rough. Those are the main 2 cons. It's quite nice. The size of it's good. It's useful. The other slight con is, this finish on here, this polished finish. I guess you could rough it up a little bit with some fine sandpaper, to take off all this polish that they polished onto here. That might help. Cosmetically, of course, it's not perfect. I mentioned the little rougher spot in here. You can feel that a little bit with your nail. You can feel some of those, where they cut the steel through and it didn't get polished smooth, but that's, again, super minor. This is a low-cost knife. It's not a lot of money. The badging's just little, and it's comfortable. And you could add a lanyard if you want to. You can add a lanyard here to carry this in your neck, or, you could put it on some kind of belt, or you could just get the Kydex version if that's what you'd prefer. Very light, not a lot, in your hand, and yet effective. What do you think of this knife? Do you have one? A lot of people were telling me, could you review a Brisa? And here it is, the Brisa Necker 70. Thanks again to my supporters, those of you who give every month. I appreciate your help a lot. And to all of you who've subscribed to the channel, thank you very much. If you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. It really does help the channel out. 85% of you haven't subscribed, and why not? What's keeping you from subscribing? I'd really like to know. Let me know in the comments below why you watch channels that you don't subscribe to. Otherwise, thank you so much. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.